That's right, Chamberlain. Just as you said, the investors are also watching to see what's happening in River State. And of course, it adds to the color that they see Nigeria through. So if we're trying to attract FDIs, then we should also take care of our politics in-house. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. I'm Mini John Mekwa. This is where we do just about 30 minutes of business before we head back to the Sunrise Daily studio. So we start from the global space where oil prices were a little changed on Tuesday as investors eyed fresh drivers, which include the upcoming U.S. inflation indicators. Nigeria's inflation is also expected tomorrow, and a monthly report from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. That's expected this week. Now, this is what has happened to the numbers this morning. It dropped. We see there 0.7% in the red for Brent at $83.30. Just yesterday, trading opened at $82, and now we've seen gone up to $83.30 after it dropped 0.7%. 0.04% is what it's dropped by for WTI of the United States, $79.09 a barrel. And there are new fresh drivers to oil prices. As we told you, there's the U.S. inflation, which is being expected. That will also determine what direction the Fed will take. Will they cut interest rates soon or not? So if inflation is still high, then of course they have no reason to cut. But if it has reduced drastically, then they may be able to cut. And then also you have the wildfire, unfortunately, in Canada. There's a wildfire going on there, remote Western Canada, that could drop the country's oil supply. Although at this time, no operational disruptions have been reported, but firefighters on Monday were racing to contain a blaze in British Columbia and two in Alberta, near the heart of the country's oil sands industry. So you see that those are potentials coming up. I wonder what it will be in 24 hours this time tomorrow. I wonder if we will still be able to say that it has not disrupted oil production, but that's something to look out for at this time. Then we come back home to the Naira and see where the NAFEX gained yesterday for the first time in almost 2 weeks to close at 1,449 Naira. That's it. That's for NAFEX. While for NAFEM, it's however, dropped. It opened at 1,466 Naira 31 kobo. This is the number we had yesterday morning, but closed at 1,478 Naira. So we know that more activities go on in NAFEM, so that captures the more realistic picture. And NAFEX has a little bit less, or a whole lot less. So that's why we saw that. We hope to see that there's a change in the trend. You know, there's anticipation of the central bank intervening in the market, perhaps. Well, I don't know if it's going to be this week, but we are training ourselves not to get excited about it, because a lot of times it just has that immediate effect and then it wears off before you know it. The Naira has to get grounds foundation before we can celebrate it again. Connected to that, Nigeria has experienced a 6.28% decrease in its total direct foreign exchange remittances for the first quarter of this year. Unfortunately, that amounts to 282.6 million, and this according to data from the Central Bank of Nigeria. This current value represents a decline from 301.57 million recorded in the same period of the previous year. That's year on year. Nigeria's direct foreign exchange remittances refers to money transfers from Nigerian family members, individuals outside the country into the country. The inflow of direct remittances into Nigeria is facilitated through various channels, including international money transfer operators and banks. Remember the IMTOs? The central bank had tried, to make it easier and more friendly. But unfortunately, for the first quarter, we still see that there's a drop in remittances. Well, on month-on-month basis, there was an increase, in direct remittances with a total of 138.56 million received, marking a 75% growth from January 2023. 779.19 remittances fell to 39.15, and that's a 53.26% drop from the 83 in February. So I guess the central bank will have to look this way again to see if there are some factors they're discouraging the remittances, or if, it's just the economy in those other countries are not doing so well. That's a topic for another day. Now, I'm sure you've seen everywhere now, Nigeria and Taiwan trade. They had a business forum yesterday. It came up again that trade between both countries was about $300 million last year. And Taiwan has come to Nigeria to try to understand the consumers more and offer not just their products, but perhaps the skills in technology, all captured in this report. Taiwan Business Forum in Nigeria has its eyes on improving on the $500 million volume of trade recorded in 2023, a volume that places Nigeria in second position among Taiwan's African trading partners.
What you have seen all around you are representing Taiwan's industrial power based on our good education, our good investment into promoting our own brain power. So Taiwan and Nigeria is a mutually complementary partners. We always said that because we, the people in Taiwan, we do only legitimate, fair, and free trade. We do not come to your backyard, dig your gold. We do not do illegal mining and stealing your solid mineral. We provide good equipment, we sell you with good facility and know-how. You buy the product, you buy the facility, and you produce your own product, we will buy from you with fair market price. This is what we call a legitimate trading.
Many lessons which Nigeria can learn from Taiwan abound, and participants, including the Director General of NASIMA, has this on his mind.
Around 1960, together with these Far Eastern countries, we were about the same thing economically. But focus is a big thing. Leadership is a very big thing when it comes to running national economies. You don't run national economies as if you are running a shop. It's different. And we've got to develop to a point where we've got to have our long-term goals set, that people, whoever comes to power, can still see that goal and key into it.
Apart from the lessons to be learned from the survival of Taiwan economy in the face of natural disasters, Nigeria seeks to acquire skills in technology, which has made Taiwan a major exporter of machinery to the United States, Nigeria, and other countries. Talking about focus now, I guess we should look at our inflation. Is expected, numbers are expected tomorrow for the month of April. What would it look like? Well, the CBN governor, Mr. Cardoso, has already started speaking. I think it was at a forum yesterday, and has said that the tightening continues. Next week is MPC, Monday and Tuesday. So we would, of course, have that live on our studios, from our studios. But let's start anticipating, I guess, well, Mr. Cardoso has already told us what to expect. If inflation keeps going up, we keep tightening. What about the spillover effects of that? But let's see what FDC says as inflation number for the month of April. Remember that month of April? That's when we had electricity hike. That's when we had petrol also added up to that. Some people were paying, as in Lagos, paying as much as 750 naira for a liter of petrol. Most of that will be captured in the numbers. We'll have that conversation after this break. To stay with us. Now let's delve into that conversation with senior analyst from financial derivatives company, Dr. Adesola Somani, joins us virtually from Reading. Dr. Somani, good morning, and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Ini. Thank you for having me on the show today.
All right, so FDC sees inflation hitting 34.25%. Tell us what factors, I think mostly general, we live with them every day, but can you tell us the factors that FDC considered to hit this 34.25%?
Indeed, thank you, Ini. So we at FDC we forecast we see a marginal increase in inflation by around 100 basis points to 34.25 in April. And this is driven by a couple of factors. Number one is planting season, which is seasonalities, I beg your pardon, which is typically associated with a scarcity of commodities. In addition to that, we've also seen petrol scarcity in April, which further pushed up prices. We also saw logistics costs going up, which contributed to prices going up. Finally, we saw the pass-through effect. Actually, in April, we saw the effects moderate, remain stable, or appreciate, I beg your pardon, quite significantly. And so that's moderating effect kind of moderated headline inflation. So that is why we are not seeing so much of a hike despite all of these factors. If you look at core inflation, which is headline inflation less seasonalities, we saw core inflation actually depreciates marginally by 0.6% to around 25.28 percentage points, to around 25.28%. And food inflation increased by around 100 basis points to around 41%. If you look at month-on-month inflation declined to about 2.7% from 3% last month, which kind of signals that, okay, a headline inflation is reaching its peak and we should soon expect it to change its trajectory.
Yeah, but I guess it would be too soon to expect the MPC to loosen or even hold, because the CBN governor has already hinted that, we are still on this hawkish stance.
Indeed, inflation currently is like near 30-year high, which is quite significant. I think it's quite important for the central bank to anchor inflation before it becomes entrenched. We're also seeing Naira weaken from being the best performing currency in, I think, end of March, to being the worst performing currency in April. These are important factors that the CBN needs to consider. And the recently completed IMF Article 4 consultation, one of the recommendations was to kind of anchor inflation, and unfortunately that may mean further increasing benchmark interest rates at the upcoming meeting next week. It's important to note also that already this year the central bank has increased benchmark interest rate by around 600 basis points year to date.
So that increase year to date, does it correspond to the reduction, if I could say, of inflationary pressure? Because inflation hasn't reduced, but I guess the pressure, the rate of increase has reduced. Can we say it's been worth it?
Indeed, one challenge of monetary policy in Nigeria, and as well as many emerging market economies, is the transmission mechanism, which is simply how the policy change affects the real economy. Here in Nigeria, the transmission mechanism is quite weak. Also, part of the drivers of inflation are structural factors such as insecurity, for example, and tightening would not affect that. But it is kind of signaling, the tightening kind of signals the intention of the central bank, and it helps to anchor inflation. So I would say that the tightening, particularly the significant increase in benchmark interest rate, has had some effect in moderating headline inflation so far.
And while we're having all of this, what's happening to our domestic prices? I know you did say it's planting season, so we expect a lot of the crops to be increasing in prices.
Essentially, so if you look at the domestic commodities prices, you see the commodities without FX content, which have to do with planting, you see them increasing in price. If you look at the price of onions, it's up month on month by around 17%. Price of tomatoes is up also month on month 16%. And the price of peppers is also up month on month around 10%. But if you look at FX commodities that have FX inputs, you realize that partly because of the foreign exchange was quite stable in April, we are seeing a moderation in their prices. If you look at the price of rice, for example, is down around 15%. If you look at the price of noodles or margarine, that were both down 4 and 16% respectively. So I think that for these commodities that have FX content, while the FX was stable, was relatively stable, we saw some moderation in the prices. But for other commodities that have to do with planting season, we've seen the prices increase because of scarcity during this period.
Yeah, so Dr. Sumani, just before we let you go, how many basis points increase MPC next week?
Oh, FDC, we are expecting. I mean, if you look at the preponderance of the balance of probabilities, we think that it's more likely that they increase by around 100 basis points at the next meeting.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me.
Let's take another break. When we come back, we head to the oil and gas space. Welcome back. Well, yesterday we had that story that the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, that's the NNPCL, and the Natural Oil Field Services Limited have commenced oil production at Oil Mining Lease 13 in Akwa Ibom State. We're expecting eventually 6,000 barrels per day. It's been going on from May the 6th, but I think eventually it's supposed to be ramped up to 40,000 barrels per day. Does this give us hope, especially now we are discussing refineries from different parts of the country, the private one, Dangote, the government one, Kaduna, and in Port Harcourt. Let's have the general manager of refineries with Aradel Holdings PLC, Mr. Temitayo Gubanjo, joins us virtually. Mr. Gubanjo, good morning and thank you for your time.
Yeah.
So when we hear stories like this, for people who are not in the oil and gas space, kind of vague, does it make any difference, really?
Yes, it does. First and foremost, for every Nigerian, I'm sure we all know that oil and gas sector provides, over 80% of the foreign earnings into the country. And we've steadily seen the decline in that production from that sector over the years due to, of course, the debt of investments in that sector to grow our new production, increase our reserves, and all of that. So it's affected the nation, over time. So when we then see new production coming up, it is something to be happy about because, of course, it provides more earnings for the country, which in essence also funnels to, finance other things that the government is doing. So yes, it is a cause for optimism. Yes.
Yeah, but it provides more earnings if it can fight the challenge of oil theft, because I mean, we've been fighting oil theft like forever. And we don't see our production has been 1.2. We hardly hit 1.5 or 1.6. We've not been hitting our quota. So, I mean, isn't this just another avenue for the oil thieves?
So, you have a point. Our OPEC target last year was 1.7 million barrels, which we didn't meet, which caused OPEC to reduce it to 1.3 for this year. And even that 1.3, the figures for last month shows that we're below that. And yes, a large part of this is with regards to the theft of the oils in the creeks of the Niger Delta. That said, though, there's a lot of focus and concerted efforts being made to plug those holes. The theft from the pipelines systems have been put in place. As I'm sure you know, surveillance and contracts and all of those things. So there is also a collaborative effort being done with security agencies within that region, just to try to plug those holes. I can't say that it has been fully effective, but to a reasonable extent, it has been effective to tide the gaps. With increased production, does that mean you will then see increased theft and sabotage? Well, we need to wait to be able to see that. But there is the pressure on the country to be able to grow its its oil and gas production.
Because when Nigerians hear that, well, we were waiting for refineries to start working, and now it seems refineries are coming on board, but where is the crude? We hear Dangote importing crude, WTI from the United States. Perhaps it's a business decision for him. But when we also hear that Nigeria has cases of debts for resources, where we're using our crude. So crude that has not even been extracted are going to be extracted just to be used to pay off debt. Then we wonder, are we going to get to a situation where we're now importing crude because we now have working refineries?
Good question, Annie. And I think you actually touched on it in the point you make. The fact of the matter is quite a large portion of the crude production is pledged. Investments that were made also have covenants tied to it, debt covenants, and a lot of this is committed basis, to the finance providers. So you will see that happen. That we do have these debts to be able to pay. A lot of the revenues from that crude production is tied to that. But like you rightfully said as well, we've actually seen the local refining space open up significantly with the modular refineries like ourselves operating, and now Dangote as well coming into the fold. Dangote is still at about half the capacity, and hopefully by the end of the year, it should ramp up significantly. These volumes are significant for a country like ours. And part of what the regulators are doing together with ourselves is to try to see how to make this crude available. Yes, there is the challenge because some of this is pledged, like I said, but there is work that is ongoing and this focus work to try to make this crude available. So in the immediate short term, yes, you may hear things like Dangote having to bring in a cargo, 2 cargoes from offshore. But there, I can tell you that there is work that is ongoing to try to ensure that the cargoes are made available, not just to Dangote, but to all the local refineries in Nigeria.
Yeah, so one time, the conversation around modular refineries was that it's not economically viable, for a country like Nigeria. But I see now that there's been a lot of conversation between modular refinery owners like yourself and the government. Tell us what's the position at this time.
Yeah, so it's a misnomer, and I think people are not well informed when they make comments like that. Yes, a modular refinery is small in scale. We're 11,000 barrels per day. If you compare us to a Dangote whose capacity is 650,000, barrels per day, I mean, we're not the same scale. That said, though, we fulfill a market need. Right? I mean, a year ago, 2 years ago, you had almost 90-something%, I think well over 90% of the products that are consumed locally in Nigeria being imported. The large part of it being petrol, which was 100% being imported. You had diesel, you had all other sorts of products. But with the advent of the refineries now, you start to see a substitution, as it were, and you start to see us adding value to the resource that we have, the crude, to be able to meet this need. The need remains, whether it's met locally or it's met by imports, then becomes, the focused decisions by the industry and by government. So it is, what we're seeing is, concerted effort by the industry as well as the regulators and government to ensure that we add value to our crude production to be able to meet this need that is already there. People need petrol, people need diesel. This is what drives economic activities, what drives the economy as a whole. There is a need for energy security as well in the country. And if you're beholden to imports, then you're open to, the vagaries of demand supply, you're open to the vagaries of price volatility, all of those things, which you have greater control over if you are the one providing that production locally. So yes, the conversation, encompasses not just the conventional refineries, but the modular refineries. And there are quite a lot. Like I said, there are a number of us that have started production, but there are even a greater number that are still under development that hopefully within the next year or two, you will also see them come.
Just before we let you go, I know you have an association of refiners. What's your level of production now?
Current production of those who are producing, we are about 35 to 40,000 barrels. By the time the other players come into play, I think cumulatively we should be as much as 100,000 barrels per day.
And I guess you focus on PMS, which is the most needed at this point, or you diversify?
Not quite actually.
Okay, all right.
A lot of the production that comes from Modular Refinery is your gas oil, HGO, kerosene, marine diesel, heavy fuel oil, things like that. But we are working on our PMS unit. We'll probably be the first Modular Refinery to start to make PMS before the start of this end of this year. And we expect other parties to come on board as well.
All right. Well, we need petrol. A lot of the vehicles on Nigerian roads are petrol run, at least for now. Thank you so much. General Manager, Refineries with Aradel Holdings PLC, Mr. Temitayo Gubanjo.
Thank you.
All right. Perhaps we can have more petrol running in Nigeria. Give us energy security in the country. Now let's look at the market, just numbers as would normally do when we're almost out of time. The NGX yesterday once again, in fact, broke our heart again yesterday. We're back to a 97,000 level, 97,708.74 is what we closed with yesterday, 55 points. We were complaining of 55.5 trillion naira. Well, we are at 55.2 trillion naira. That's what we closed with yesterday. We saw a green activity chart, but that didn't do a whole lot. A lot of profit taking happened yesterday. I think Seplat dealt a huge blow. Investors in Seplat did that to us, even though we see top trades were Access Co, Universal, but the powerful market movers did that to us. So at the close of trade yesterday, we're down more than 0.5%. Hope we'll recover a bit today. Let's head back to the Sunrise Daily Studios. I'll see you again tomorrow.